Hi everyone, in this video tutorial we will be going through the process of setting up our OpenIPC camera from RunCam, but this will work in any other cameras based on OpenIPC firmware with Radxa. Inside this 3D print case there's a Radxa Zero 3W. And don't worry about this. This is for Ruby firmware, the 4-button switch that we normally use for navigating to the menus. But we will not be using this on this tutorial. We will need an SD card and an adapter to connect it to the laptop, of course, in order to flash the firmware of Radxa. After we plugged in the SD card, we want to format the SD card. We want to make sure it's empty completely. Then we select the Radxa Zero 3W from this GitHub. The latest version is 1.5. We scroll down and we find the zip file and we download it. I have already downloaded it. I'm not going to do it again. So that's the file. We right click and we extract. Once the extraction has finished, we should have a folder with that file, which is about 4 gigabytes. And in the Win32 disk imager, we make sure we select our device that we have the SD card plugged in. And then we go where this file is located. There it is. And we hit write, yes. The writing is complete. We can exit that. Can close this as well, and we will remove the SD card. And we will plug it into our Radxa. Next thing we want to plug is a monitor, just to set it up. And a regular keyboard with USB Type-C, of course. Plug, and we plug it to the power supply. The first screen that we will see is this, which is the login screen, and we want to type root and root, and we are in. Then we will navigate to home, Radxa, scripts, and we will run the first script /resize fs. And the next thing we want to do is set up the internal Wi-Fi so that we can have it available as a link for our SSH. And we type this command. We click activate connection. And my Wi-Fi is called White Rabbit. I click enter. Connecting. And I'm connected. And you can see there is a star in front of the Wi-Fi that it has been connected now. Go back, quit. And we reboot. Now that we have finished this step, we should be able to have SSH connection available to our Radxa, so we don't need a keyboard, and we connect our Wi-Fi adapter. Okay. We do have normal connection. Good. And the next thing that we want to do is enable the OpenIPC. All done. Now that we know the IP of the Radxa Zero, we can simply use this configurator. It's called OpenIPC Configurator, and you can download it for free from the GitHub of OpenIPC. In order to connect to the Radxa, we click Radxa Zero, and we want to make sure that this IP is the correct IP of the Radxa. And then we click Fetch, and read. From here we can change the channel to whatever channel we want. We can change the TX power. From this menu we can change the resolution of the screen. For example, in my case, my goggles support up to 720p 60 frames per second. There are other options that can support 1080p 90 frames per second, like the HD Zero. So we have to select the right option according to our display. But let's leave this for now like this. And we click Save and Reboot. On our screen now we have the old telemetry here, the RSSI, okay, and we also have this data that will be showing the resolution, the frames per second, and some data for the WFB. But we don't really need this telemetry here, since we now have the native OSD of Betaflight or Rhino. So let's enable that in the OpenIPC configurator. The only thing we need to do in the OpenIPC configurator is just click this button. And then we reboot. Now that we finished with Radxa, it's time to set up our OpenIPC RunCam camera. In order to find the IP of the camera, we go to Setup and we change this to 1. And if we scan, it will show just these two IPs. This IP is our laptop, and this IP is our OpenIPC RunCam camera. I have already saved it as OpenIPC camera. If I click here, it's already saved. Every time you click Fetch and you have an IP, the configurator saves that IP, so you don't have to type this every time. And if we click Fetch now, and read, we can see here the settings of the OpenIPC RunCam. And we want to change the frequency to the one that we already have on the Radxa. Maybe reduce a little bit the transmit power. It's too much for the bench test. And on the camera settings, we can change resolution, frames per second. Let's change frames per second to 60 so we can correct the exposure. Also, the codec is wrong. The default codec is 8 to 64, while the Radxa is set to 8 to 65. And we click Save and Reboot. We click Receive Drone Key, Enter, and from this menu we select Radxa 03W. This is the correct IP of the Radxa, and we click Send GS Key, Enter, Enter, and we reboot. So what we did is that we received, when we select this option, we are working in the OpenIPC camera, so we received the drone key from the OpenIPC camera, then we selected the Radxa in order to start working to Radxa, and we send the GS key to the IP of the Radxa. That's the one, and we restarted, rebooted. Once the camera is rebooted, we will immediately see that we have video stream. Okay, and we need to set up the OSD now. For that, we will need to download some extra files. So, fonts. That depends on what firmware you have flashed to your flight controller. You need to download different fonts. So for Betaflight, for example, we go to Betaflight, font PNG, and we click download raw file to our OpenIPC configurator. I have already downloaded it, so yes. And you will need both files, font HD and font. Download raw file. Yes. And then you will need the binary file. In release folder, *6E MSP OSD. Same location of OpenIPC configurator. Yes. Then we go to camera settings. We click MSP display port. Enter, 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 enter. And then we upload the fonts. And we reboot the camera. And here it is. The Betaflight OSD.